And I looked into all the reasons why people might consider my son a curse for us, but I could find none at all. All I found was reasons to love him even more and to be proud of his uniqueness. So, like everyone else, he has his own set of challenges and they affect our lives in a certain way. But that does not take away from the fact that my son is my source of joy and happiness, even amidst all the worries that his autism brings with it. Well, every parent, I think, struggles raising their kid. Raising a child is not an easy job, but when you have a child with special needs, it's just different. When my son was diagnosed, I was pretty sure I could fix everything. A few years later, I realized that he did not need fixing. I did, and the world around him did. So that was the biggest challenge for me. Changing my perspective, the way I think, was tough. That was my biggest struggle to begin with. To believe that although he does not speak, he's just as intelligent and sharp as any other child out there. To stop comparing him with others all the time, to appreciate and respect his uniqueness, and to love us the way he was. All that was a big challenge for me initially. I mean, to change how I look at my son and how I treat him was my biggest challenge. And once I was there, I wanted to go ahead and change the world. And that is turning out to be quite a struggle. So I think that was my biggest struggle in raising my son. The constant need to remind myself that he might be differently abled, but he is just as smart, just as intelligent as anyone out there. And I have to start believing in him and trusting in his abilities. I think it's just that the world is so anxious around people who are different. They just cannot comprehend what they are and how they should respond and react around them. That their initial, like their gut reaction is to just push them away. And that's what we need to stop doing, to be scared of different. We have to learn to be more inclusive and appreciate difference rather than be scared of it. Having a support system in general, some for a lot of single moms, that is not an option, but having someone who is going to stand by your side through your journey is such a strong support for everyone who is in this journey, I think, because it's not something you can do alone. An emotional support is makes a huge difference. Another thing that has helped me to get to where I am is my son. Every once in a while, frustration would creep into me and I would feel very defeated. But one look at my son and how happy and content he seemed, that smile, that laughter, that playfulness, and that extraordinary courage to get up every day and navigate the world despite of those sensory overloads, that challenged me to kind of fight for him every day, to stand up for him, to advocate for him, and do what I do every day, no matter what, for him and for many more like him. So I think my family has helped me through my struggles. And in our case, our son's autism has totally changed us. What we now want from our life is so different from what we wanted a few years back. Little things that we might not have noticed otherwise, they give us so much joy now, like watching our son enjoy the wind on his face or hearing him say hi to a complete stranger for the very first time. In fact, even him eating his own food without gagging or throwing up was so much joy. So little things that we would not have noticed earlier give us joy right now. It's like miracles happening right in front of our eyes. So our son's autism made us more empathetic towards others. We no more feel the need to judge people because we know how it feels. So his autism has definitely made us better human beings. We find joy in smaller things. We have fewer expectations and we have more acceptance. We could not change his diagnosis, but his diagnosis has changed us in such a beautiful way. And I looked into all the reasons why people might consider my son a curse for us, but I could find none at all. all I found was reasons to love him even more and to be proud of his uniqueness. So, like everyone else, he has his own set of challenges and they affect our lives in a certain way. But that does not take away from the fact that my son is my source of joy and happiness, even amidst all the worries that his autism brings with it.
You wrote an article called Eight Mistakes I Made as a Mom of a Child with Autism. Can you
Mhm.
briefly share what those eight mistakes are?
Well, to begin with, a lot of my readers pointed out that eight is a very small number, and I totally agree. So if I had to rename my article, I would call it my top eight mistakes as a mom of child with autism because I'm still continuing to make mistakes and I'm sure I'm going to make more mistakes as I go. So the eight mistakes, well, the first one, as I have been saying, hiding his diagnosis. That was certainly something I regret. I think it only sent signals to others that I was embarrassed about my son, which I was not. But hiding his diagnosis just felt like it's demotivating for him every time he sees that. So I think that was a big mistake. I tried to make him age appropriate, make him behave age appropriately all the time, and I kept pushing him towards things that he had no interest in. That's my second big mistake because I was constantly trying to push him towards things that he did not like just because they seemed age appropriate. I didn't want him to listen to his rhymes anymore when he was 6 or 7. I let him listen to those now because I know that that's his happy place. And I would rather have him happy than be age appropriate because the world wants him to be that way. So I don't do the age appropriate thing anymore. I let him be the way he is. The next mistake was that I was trying to fix him. When we got his diagnosis, I was constantly trying to look for ways to fix him. And there's a difference between getting your child the help he or she needs and trying to turn him into something that he's not meant to be. So I stopped trying to fix my son. And I think I'm so glad I realized that mistake sooner than later. Mm. I give him a chance to be himself instead of trying to fit him in a mold that everyone around him expects him to be. I'm not doing that anymore. Another mistake that I made was I assumed he was stupid. How stupid is that? So because my son could not talk, most of the time I assumed he did not know. So like there have been so many incidents after that where he has shown his spark of intelligence and he has shown that he knows so much more than I would have thought he does. And that's only because he did not talk. So my assumption that he is incompetent only reflects on my stupidity. It does not reflect on his. It only shows that I know so little about him. So that was another mistake I made. I assumed he's not smart enough. The other mistake, which is one of my pet peeve, is that we conveniently all of us assume that every time a child with autism has a meltdown, it's a tantrum. I mean, I was that parent where I thought, oh, he's just trying to be, he's just throwing a tantrum. He's let's just ignore. And now when I look back, I realized that when I should have found a way to comfort him, I was ignoring him because I thought it was a tantrum. It was he was having a meltdown. He was in pain. He was in some kind of discomfort, and I was not ready to accept that. And that was one of my biggest mistakes. I can't stress enough how important it is for parents to realize that meltdowns, there's a function behind every meltdown. It's just not a tantrum. That's another one. Well, the next one is I made a mistake of assuming that he's always in his own world. He does look like he's in his own world, but he is constantly absorbing and observing from his environment. It's just that he does not look at you in the eye and like everyone else does, but it does not mean that he is in his own world. He is very aware. In fact, I've realized that there's a level of hypervigilance in him so that he can have better control of his surroundings to keep his body calm. So he's even a change in the color of the floor. he would know that. He would be the first person to notice that. So, no, he's not in his own world. He's very, very aware of his world. So I stopped assuming that he does not care or he's completely oblivious. Another mistake that I made, which I'm still kind of guilty of, is sweeping everything under the autism umbrella. So like it's just convenient for us sometimes, right? Like if he's unable to do something, let's say, oh, you know what, he has autism, so he's not able to do that. No, that's not always true. That's not always true. If he doesn't like to eat something, it could be because he has sensory needs, but it also could be because it's just he's being picky. He's just being a kid. So I have to stop pushing everything under the autism carpet and say that just because he's autism, it's okay. I don't want to give him that crutch. So, and I've noticed that every time I push my son beyond his limits, not giving him the excuse of autism, he has bloomed and shown greater independence. So I've stopped making his life too easy because he has autism. And I'm glad I'm doing that. I still do. I still sometimes like, okay, let's put your socks on, let's put your shoes on, and then move on. And then I realized, oh, no, not doing that. He can do that on his own, not because just because he has autism and his motor skills are poor. It does not mean that he cannot do that. It can take him maybe 10 minutes instead of 1 minute as other kids would, but he will do it. So I stopped pushing everything under the autism umbrella. And finally, my last mistake, which is not really my last mistake, I'm making more as I go, is I have stopped expecting others to know what it is to walk in my shoes. I mean, why should they? How should they? I wouldn't if I did not have a different able child. Probably I would know what it is to be with a child with special needs. So expecting others to know my struggle, my challenges might be asking for too much. Expecting them to not judge, well, that's something I still expect them to. But otherwise, I think asking others to always understand what I'm going through is probably putting them in a spot. I don't want to do that anymore. I think that's a mistake.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that that is going to help a lot of moms listening to this podcast who are still searching, and we're all searching, and we continue to search and we continue to make mistakes. And I think the more we support each other on this journey with love and patience, the better off our kids are too.
Mhm. And I really think it is so important to reach out to other moms and talk to other moms because I mean it's a long journey. It's not going to end. So there'll be mistakes you'll be making, there'll be experiences you'll have that somebody else might share with you, but you will also have experiences that nobody else has had. And you can have a very unique experience that others can learn from you. And the same applies to you. You can learn from someone else's experience. So talking to other moms, listening to other moms is so, so important just because you can learn so much. You cannot do this all on your own. You need to go out and you should know that you're not alone in this journey. There are so many out there. It does sometimes feel very lonely. It feels like you're all alone and it feels like you just can't do this anymore. But just talking to other moms is so motivating sometimes.
What is your best advice for other mother guides?
I keep that short and sweet. I would say just enjoy a child with or without diagnosis. He's still the same value of joy. So, I mean, there is absolutely no reason to change how you look at your child. Enjoy them. Also, be kind to yourself because there are so many moms out there who really think that they're not doing enough, but you are doing more than enough. So be kind to yourself. I cannot stress these two things enough. Love your child and love yourself.
When you take care of yourself and when you live your best life, you're providing the best life for your child. Yes, I have a special needs child, but I also am a person. I have a company, yes, but I also need my self care,
Yes.
and And you have to find, I read an article for Thrive Global about this, about self care and how it can't be like the last thing on the list. It has to be the first thing on the list. And you have to figure out how to work things around that and people to help. And those are where those solutions are coming in. You have to get mothers to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
There are ways, there's organizations, there's respite groups, there's best friends. Like there are people who can help and it will benefit you and in the end benefit your child as well. And so that's part of our Flamingo support group is to come together and talk about those things and be there for each other and to share those resources so that every special needs mom can take care of themselves, live their best life so their child can live their best life too.
If you could just take a moment and give us your top lessons and your best advice for us, for moms, guardians, parents, whoever's listening to this podcast, what would that be?
Trust your gut. I'll go back to the very beginning of that conversation. Don't let anyone tell you what you know is not true. I don't care, again, what degrees they have, what letters they have behind their name. It's your child. If you don't know something, find a provider. Like that's how we provide therapy. It's a collaborative effort. You know your child. We may know the science or the other pieces that you don't know. And how do we work together to make that work for your child? There is no other child like your child. So we have the spectrum, right, which is really wide in general, but then we just have individual fingerprints. Everybody is completely different no matter what. So I would say that's, number one is trust that gut. Number two is that self-care. Take care of yourself. Find a way. If you can't find a way, reach out to me. Like, we'll figure out something. I know you do life coach. Like, I know you have a beautiful way of getting, to help people understand and find that way. And if there's not a way, like, let's create a way, like the center. Like, that's my thing. But you have to take care of yourself, especially having a special needs child. That child is going to need you longer in their life than is a typical child, a neurotypical child. And so you've got to be on your best, and you might be like, oh, I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm good kind of thing. And that's kind of how I was. But guess what? I wasn't good. And even if I felt like I was good, I'm way better now than I was back then anyway. And it means my child is way better now than she was back then. So please, if you hear nothing else, trust your gut, take care of yourself, and then reach out to that community. Again, I did that for 7+ years, on my own and made it through it. But there's nothing like a community. There is nothing like somebody, you don't even have to finish the story for them to understand what you feel and what you've been through. And it's out there. So seek out and find those resources. And the last one is, which what we do every day is just advocate, advocate, advocate. Whether that means you need to write a book, whether that just means you need to go to Publix and say, hey, this is, my, child and that's what I did. And they're going to, can you please educate your staff that like, this is their iPad. And when she says something, if they could just be a little bit more patient and listen a little closer so that she can get reinforcement for using her iPad, because a lot of times when the kids talk with it, it's like people don't understand. They just brush it off. And like, no, listen, can you please train your staff? Like we can do that. We can educate our community. We can educate the places that we're going about our kids, whether it's being nonverbal, whether it's them stimming, whether it's sensory stuff, like whatever the thing is, like we are our child's biggest asset and resource and have the strongest voice as parents to be able to do that. So after you've trusted your gut and after you've taken care of yourself and got a community, then you'll feel like energized and passionate and you'll have that energy and that motivation, that desire then to go out and create your own community and your own advocacy for your child.
We went to an autism conference in Vancouver because it didn't seem like we had access to any really great positive information in our own community. So we had to go outside of our own community. That's very different now. It's changed a ton, thankfully. So we went to Vancouver. We learned about a lot of things that the people were doing that seemed really realistic, like a gluten-free diet. And that's where our journey of gluten-free started. And that was back in 2008 in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we're so thankful for that experience because number one, it educated us and knowledge is power, as you know. and it gave us a community to belong to, and it gave us hope. And those three things together are so crucial, so those are things that, I want to help share with other, younger parents who are going along the autism journey. Those three things, that if you have education, you have positivity, and you have a community, in which to support you, those are really important. And those can really change your perspective and the trajectory of your child's life.
What are the biggest lessons that you've learned, being a mom raising a child on the autistic spectrum?
I think there's so many, and there's so many lessons, and so much joy has come from being his mother. One of the things is he has continually, if we set the bar, so we as in his parents, his teachers, his coaches, his whole education system, if we set the bar here, every single time he'll move it up every single time. So I think that's one of the lessons that we learned early on, actually in 8th grade, when we had a case conference. And the purpose of the conference was to determine whether he was going to gain a high school diploma. And we didn't know that until we walked into the meeting. And they said to us, you need to decide right now whether your child is going to get a certificate or a diploma from Noblesville High School. And my husband and I looked at each other like, well, why wouldn't he get a diploma? Why, and why would we decide that right now? Well, that's how we do it. And you need to decide right now. My husband said, after we left the meeting, he's like, I had to hold you from jumping across the room and jumping across the table, because it was just something that we see his abilities as, him being able to achieve whatever he puts into his mind, with support, obviously, right? So if he has this dream, we feel like it's our job to help make that come true. And to help give him those supports and those opportunities to make those dreams come true. And we just expected, we were a little naive, obviously, we expected that his teaching and his education staff would view him as the same way. And that was naive. So anyhow, we had to fight for him to go on that diploma track. And yes, he did receive it. But so I guess that's just one little example of somebody putting a ceiling over him. And we're like, oh no. And not only that, he graduated from college. He has a college degree. You know what I mean? So if we look back and we would have, said, oh yeah, I guess you're probably right. That we should have just gone we'll go ahead and he should just get a certificate. Look what how different his life would be. So I love telling that story, because not only I'm wildly passionate and so proud of him, but it gives other parents hope, right? And it gives them parents too. Your child better than anybody, and don't let others put limits on what your child can do, because chances are they're going to knock right through whatever that limit has been put on. That's the biggest lesson that I've learned.
I love that. I love that story. I feel your passion, and I can also relate to what you're saying. And so your son is how old now?
He's 26.
26. And what is he doing now?
So he went from having one job for us, 3 hours a week, to now he has 4 jobs. So right now he's on the coaching staff for our high school's football team.
Wow.
Which he's wildly passionate about sports. And he is a substitute teacher. He's the announcer for the men's and women's lacrosse teams at our high school. And then he's our team leader for some of the special projects that we do at Be Free.
Yeah. And this is a person that in 8th grade, we had to decide whether he would get a certificate or not. Right.
Exactly.
And so that's, you and I, our sons are grown, And so I think our stories are important. And I'm sure you just lit fire and hope and inspiration to many, many listeners listening to this podcast. So thank you for
I
sharing.
hope
that.
so. I'm so happy to. I'm really happy. I like you are positive. I'm a joy seeker and a joy spreader. And so I really, really love to get positive messaging and hope out to people.
What is your best advice for a mother raising an autistic child?
Well, I would say to really just appreciate your child for the unique gifts that they have. And on days, that's really, really hard. I know it is. I've lived it and I continue to live it, right? So it doesn't end just because they're an adult child now, like you said earlier, and that never ends. But I would say just really appreciate the unique gifts because all people have special gifts. So I think that, focusing even especially on the hard days, focusing on those unique special gifts that your child has, I think is something that can help get you through a really tough day. If you have a child with autism diagnosis, you're a mom on a mission. You're a
Yes.
mom on a mission to, get your child the best that life has to offer. So I would just say, don't give up. Just don't ever, ever, ever give up. And I would just say that autism is a journey and it definitely is something that it can be defining, but it shouldn't, right? It's part of someone's life. It's part of your life and your journey, but it doesn't need to be your whole entire life, right? It's just a piece. It's just a piece of your life and the rest of it can be what you want it to be. It's not a sentence to a life that's lesser than somebody without an autism diagnosis. It doesn't need to define you and it doesn't mean that your life is less than anyone else's that doesn't have an autism diagnosis.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and share it on social media. You can download my free guide, 5 Things I Wish I Knew Raising My Son with Autism, by going to my website, mothersguidethroughautism.com. Also, please join our Facebook group, Mother's Guide Through Autism, for support. I'm sending you all hope and love. Thanks so much for listening.